1 p.m., so we'll call the meeting to order. And turn it over to the city for the approval.
Yes, on our agenda item 2, I guess I trust you guys have noted the roll for your respective boards for the roll call. Item 2 is the approval of the agenda, and each side's going to, I guess I would entertain a motion from the city side to approve the agenda, and you'll do the same for that. So, motion for approval of the agenda.
Second.
Motion and second.
All right, and from the county side, we have a motion to approve, motion by Mr. Davis. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. McHugh. All in favor?
All in favor on the city side?
Aye.
Very good. Agenda's approved. Next item is item 3. It's a hearing and action to rezone. Notice is hereby given that Caleb, Swarentine of EC Properties LLC submitted a petition to rezone the following described real estate in the joint jurisdiction area of the city of Brookings and Brookings County, South Dakota. The south 150 feet of the east 165 feet of Lot 1, Kingman First Edition, in the southeast quarter, Section 16, Township 110 North, Range 50 West, also known as 1806 Highway 14, from a joint jurisdiction residence R1B single family district to a joint jurisdiction business B3 heavy district. Stacy, will you explain this matter to everyone?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is seeking a rezoning request for a portion of property located at 1806 U.S. Highway 14 from joint jurisdiction R1B to joint jurisdiction B3, as the applicant would like to relocate the existing residence seen here and use the property for a use consistent with the joint jurisdiction B3 district. The 2.32 acre property is located just north of the U.S. Highway 14, and a portion of the land was rezoned from joint jurisdiction B3 to joint jurisdiction R1B in 1995 to allow for this residence to be constructed. The ownership of the property has since changed, and the current owner would like to relocate the existing home to another location and use the entire parcel for business uses. The land to be rezoned is entirely surrounded by property zone joint jurisdiction B3 with the RJ's gas stop immediately to the south. The county and city planning commissions both make a recommendation to their respective governing bodies. The county commissioners and city council will hear their rezoning requests and make the final determination. Findings of fact. Number 1, the 2040 City of Brookings Comprehensive Plan shows this general area as either commercial or low-density residential. The City Comprehensive Plan does support the rezoning of the property to joint jurisdiction B3. Number 2, the general area is predominantly zoned joint jurisdiction B3. Staff recommends approval of the rezoning request based on the support of the City Comprehensive Plan and the surrounding land uses.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve on the city side.
So moved. Second.
And second?
All right, on the county side, motion to approve. Thank you, Mr. Bartley, and a second. Thank you, Mr. McHugh.
Is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this request? If so, please come to the monitor and state your name and your reasons.
My name is Caleb Swartine. I guess I would just follow up with exactly what she said. We're looking to move the house off, and then we have a landscape business here in Brookings, so we're looking to use the property for that.
Very good, thank you. Anyone here to speak in favor of this matter? Anyone to speak in opposition to this matter? Any questions or comments from the city planning commissioners?
Stacy, would you be able to show us what the permitted uses are if this is rezoned?
Yes. It will take me just a minute to get there. Okay, I have the permitted uses up on the screen here. And so we have retailer service store, personal health service, office, hotel, drive-in food service, public transportation facility, public utility facility, funeral home or mortuary, financial institution, grocery supermarket, automobile sales, gas station, parking lot, or parking facility or lot, indoor or outdoor recreational facility, car wash, animal hospital, temporary storage facility, reverse vending machine, a motel, or a daycare facility. These uses down here are special exception uses allowed by the Board of Adjustment. So this would include outdoor sales, storage and warehousing, lumber yard, nursery or greenhouse, automobile service station, motor vehicle repair shop, citizen drop-off for recyclables, buyback center for recyclables, household hazardous waste site, transfer site for recyclables, light processing facility. Number 12, I'd like to call your attention to. This is a contractor shop and a storage yard. 13 is seasonal roadside stand, assembling, packaging, freight handling, light manufacturing, utility, truck and trailer rental, kennel, or wholesale trade. So those are the special exception uses, and the petitioner may need to go in front of the Board of Adjustment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any additional comments from the City Planning Commission or questions? Okay.
All right, from the county side, any questions? Looks like for them, they kind of highlighted the agenda, or excuse me, the item that they're specifically looking at. Anything we have on our end? I think it was pretty straightforward.
So city side, you ready for the question? Very good. Stacy, please call the roll.
Thank you. Aiken?
Yes. Now we'll call the county side alternate here. McHugh? Aye.
Drew?
Yes. Davis?
Johnson?
Yes. Nelson?
Aye.
Jorgensen?
Yes. Kleinjohn?
Pierce?
Yes.
Ford?
Yes.
Farjan?
Yes. Spence?
Yes.
Muesberger?
Yes.
Jensen?
Rasmussen?
Yes.
Erickson? Roger? Oh, excuse me. It will be Elankovich.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And Bartley. Motion carries.
Motion carries.
All righty, so motion carries, and on to agenda item number 4. The next item on the agenda is discussion and review on upcoming draft joint jurisdictional zoning ordinance. It's like,
Thank you, Chairperson. While Raylyn hands that out, I'm going to get connected. Now, Mike suggested I go relatively quickly, and that's good because I got this presentation down to 2 hours at the office without anyone asking any questions. So I think we can do it in about 2 hours. Maybe closer to 15 minutes.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
What we are doing today is I'm going to attempt to condense about 20 months worth of meetings into about a half an hour at most to describe what you've got. Some of you may have ventured into cracking open the draft of the joint jurisdiction ordinance that's been put together and worked on by the joint jurisdiction subcommittee over the last several months. Some of you may not have, and I'm sure that was mostly because you wanted to wait to hear what I had to say about it. So this is the time to do so. And really what we're going to do today, as we get this thing going, what we're going to do today is I'll really just introduce it. In the end, my primary goals on this next slide here are to really, I'll give you a very cursory review of joint jurisdiction legislation or rules, and then more or less I want to be able to answer a couple of frequently asked questions that I think will be frequently asked as we go through it, maybe try to answer them. As you're looking through it, did I actually read that? Well, say what I think you may have actually read. And then go through, help you figure out where to find some things, and then talk about process in going through. But first, who am I? I'm Luke Muller. I work with First District Association of Local Governments. We work with 11 counties and 73 towns in the area in northeast South Dakota. County knows me. I come to every one of the meetings for the county zoning board. I don't come to as many of yours. As the city, with the city, I've been working with the city and county on updating a draft of the joint jurisdiction ordinance with a subcommittee and doing a draft, meeting, doing a draft, meeting again. It's kind of a rinse, lather, repeat sort of a situation. And we've gone through and gotten it to this point. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. I've got two choices. I can be relatively short and dry, or I can be slightly less dry, a little more witty, but significantly longer. So I might go with the short and dry version here. The first part I want to talk about is joint jurisdiction. You're aware you have a joint jurisdiction ordinance, obviously. That's why you're sitting here. It was adopted right around, I think, 2 months after I was born. The original version that you have. It was updated a couple of times into there. I noticed the list of uses there was updated for the commercial district was in 1995 in that commercial district. Give you an idea, there have also been other updates in there. As far as joint jurisdiction enabling legislation at the state, it's important to understand that as you go through this because it really lays the foundation for how you need to work together as you do this process. 11-2 is the county side for enabling legislation for zoning. 11-4 and 11-6 is in for the municipalities, and they ultimately lead to, from the joint jurisdiction standpoint, they can go from any direction of the county just flat out abdicating, saying, you take it, all the way up to the county sharing it in some way, shape, or form. Could be them having it entirely, and anywhere in between. And we've got all sorts of communities. We talked about that within the group, the subcommittee, but how that goes. I've highlighted a few points in there. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but basically 11-2-14 establishes the ability for the counties to have zoning in the areas that aren't city, is what it amounts to. If the city wants to have it, the city can have their own zoning. That's what 11-2-32 says, is that you have your own jurisdiction. You can also have zoning if you adopt it the right way. What it also says is that within a joint jurisdiction area beyond the municipal limits, you can also have joint jurisdiction if it's adopted the way that it's listed in 11-6-10, which says that the counties and municipality can meet jointly, hold at least one hearing, have a notice of the hearing, and then adopt a land use plan for the area, of which generally what we'll do, the areas that I work in, I've worked with Watertown and some other towns in doing this, and in those ones, they ultimately adopted each other's land use plan, is what they did, with maybe a few moderate revisions or addendums to it. But they need to adopt that land use plan, and then the next section says then they go ahead and they adopt their rules as well. Again, they need to adopt the same things, is what it amounts to. So if there's a deviation, if the City Planning Commission thinks differently than the County Planning Commission, well, that's a problem. We need to take the same one to the County Commission and City Council, and they get to meet sitting together the same way, have their public hearing as well, and it needs to be handled. It's got to be the same ordinance that's adopted. The following the adoptions, you've got to identify just that process. I already noted how they go about doing that, and that they have to be adopted by ordinance. I guess I got all the way through that a lot quicker than I expected. The main reason I wanted to get that point across was the fact that we really need to understand that everyone's got to be together throughout this. This is going to be as painful or painless as you want to call it, but we're all going to have to meet together as we go through this process and be on the same page. In doing this process, what we did is the group had a wide swath as far as county planning commission members, county commission members, city planning commission members, city council members, had some folks from just the area in which we're talking about, as well as having some interested parties. BMU was there. We had some from Banner and a lot of entities in that room, as well as we heard from other individuals showing up as well, talking. When we started this, what we wanted to do is we broke this into basically 3 areas, and again, kind of had to work our way backwards. The geographer in me was tickled in that we got to start with where. And bottom line, this is a variation of how I used to do things when I was in graduate school with geography, is that we'd start with where, how do we do it, what do we do in that area, and sometimes we had to go back through and do it again. But in order to start it, what we did is we had folks get into groups. I'm not going to hand out markers at this meeting, but basically we had color time. We went through, gave a little background as far as what is the existing joint jurisdiction area, and talked about the relevance of the colors you see on that map, which are the ones that have city zoning of some sort and then are remained in the ag district. The pink on this map here, or purple, however you want to look at it, would be the portion that has a city zoning designation, basically something other than ag. The orange is the ag district in that area. The next map was just a little more breakdown. I didn't even have the zoning districts on there because it really was irrelevant as we went through. It turned out to be irrelevant as we went through this process. We also talked about future land use plans that the city has gone through and updated, as well as the county with those areas. I think that as time goes on here, we'll probably be referring to those a few times, but just point out that we had both entities talked about that as well. But this map here is what your current joint jurisdiction zoning area is. That yellow outline outlines the current joint zoning area. One of the points that I really breezed over there a few minutes ago with the the statute regarding the establishment of those areas is that the boundary can go as far as 6 miles away from your municipality unless you have another municipality within 12 miles of you. At that point, then it winds up being at a line equidistant between the two communities. So those green lines on there that you see, and they're just very skillfully drawn, I might add, by the person sitting here. They're just lines on there to indicate about where that line would be. You can see the one in Volga that we're probably about 3/4 of a mile off on currently. The one with Aurora is about a 1/2 a mile off, and the one with Bushnell is probably within about 400 feet, real close. And so that was one of the first things that we had to tackle and talk about. Ultimately, though, as we drew, we went, we revised, we redrew. The area that was agreed upon and recommended from the subcommittee is the area you see in green on this map. I do want to apologize. I had planned on sending this map on to you a long time ago, and instead I got it out today, I think. The area that we've got here is the area in green. You can see that it was shrunk up for the most part, or at least held firm east to west for the most part. The areas far as in reference to Aurora, I know Aurora took that up at their, with their council, as whether or not they were okay with that. With Bushnell, it was essentially the same line. I'm not positive if they actually had a action or not in that one, but it was essentially the same line as that boundary. The areas to the north, the area expansion to the north, as I recall, went along the lines because of the fact that that's where the town is projected to grow farther north and wanted to have a little more room on the north. And then on the south, it wanted to capture the south interchange there at the Elkton exit, or at least have the ability to have some say into that. Those are how those went north and south farther. Again, we'll get into more detail on this at later meetings, but I just kind of wanted to touch base with a couple of things in there. Next part was about the how, the administrative portion of the ordinance. And again, what we did on that is we took a couple of portions, had both county and city staff talk about how they handle requests. Someone walked through the door, how is this administered right now? And then I read the ordinance and tried to follow what it said and tried to take things very literal as I looked at it. Bottom line is that, as you're aware, basically the way that's handled is that if your property is zoned something other than ag, you go see the city staff. You go in and handle it that way. If the property is zoned ag, you go see the county staff, and you go through and handle that way. So the administration takes those two routes. In looking at the joint ordinance, it doesn't necessarily read exactly that way, although that's not totally uncommon from an ordinance that's originally written back at that time frame. But the bottom line is that that's how it's been operated. So one of the things that we took away was the idea that we need to make the ordinance read the way that we're actually doing things, unless someone has a big reason that it needs not to be. And so from the standpoint of getting permits, this convoluted flow chart kind of shows how it was listed within the ordinance. Honestly, even to clean it up, it would still look very similar to this. I'm not going to go through all the steps. I'll just point out that there are a lot of different ways, and there's some arrows. It looks like a third grader drawing up a football play on a playground, but one of the things, there are some implied routes that are taken within there as well. The other point that I put into here was we just referenced within the switching over now more to what's in the draft itself again, went through and referenced how an amendment does happen. The process we're going through here can be initiated by the city, the county, or an applicant, and then just identified on this flow chart here for you what they can initiate. But again, we have to meet jointly with the planning commissions in a public hearing. We have to meet jointly with the elected boards in a public hearing as well. So again, those joint meetings are the important parts to that. I just want to underline a couple of changes that had happened within there. First one, of course, the way that we did it is that within the ordinance, just flat out said it. It specifically states that this ordinance here ultimately becomes only in reference to the ag district. For 90% of this document, it really references and really handles the area that's zoned ag in this joint jurisdiction area. And then the other caveat, or the other statement within there, says that if it's not zoned ag, then the rules of the city of Brookings apply as far as zoning rules go. So that if an individual has that zoning designation, well then, the zoning book as has been adopted and amended, so it's a living document, it can be amended in that area. They can just go downstairs, or they can come down here and go through things the same way. The benefit to that is that we don't have to continually be updating. Every time you update the city's zoning ordinance, you don't have to update this as well. The other side to that is that the ag district still gets its building permits through the county. That is listed within the ordinance, and that's how it goes from there. The one note, any property, probably one of the larger changes as far as administration goes, is any property zoned ag would get conditional uses and variances from a newly created joint jurisdiction board of adjustment. However, the rules that they follow would be for notice, the rules for notice and meeting schedule, rules for notice, application procedures, that sort of thing, would follow the county's rules. So as far as how long notice is applied for, and the other information, say the conditional use variance standards that are within there, ultimately follow the county's rules on if there's a through F or your hardships. I'll talk a little bit more about what that breaks down here in just a second, but again, that would apply to, that Board of Adjustment would apply only to those areas zoned ag, is what that separate board would. That separate board is proposed to include 1 county commissioner, 2 county planning commission members, 2 city planning commission members, and 1 city council member. And then the city would appoint alternates for their 3 members. The county would appoint alternates for their 3 members. In theory, the idea is that hopefully we would never have a less than full board because of that. So I'm going to suggest we'll do, if there's any questions, or someone want to talk to me about anything that we talk about, to save them a little bit here.
Luke,
Yes.
can you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
I believe the discussion was 1 county commissioner, 2 county planning commissioners, 1 city council, and 1 city planning. It was a 5-member board, 3 county, 2 city reps, and then there'd be alternates. The way this is set up, it's an even number board.
I had it as 6 when we got done, and I always wondered that. But I'd be.
Maybe I could ask Leanne or Greg Fargen or Mr. Bartley if you would call it being an odd number.
Yeah, it was an odd number. I brought that point up that we can't have an even number. We got to have a tiebreaker at some point. And the discussion was that because most of the variances that we would ask for Board of Adjustment would be probably county requests that we do to county planning commissioners, 1 county commissioner, 1 city planning commission, because there wouldn't be as many applicants for that, and 1 city council member. So we got back to 5. I remember the discussion. I remember we bounced around 6, but I think we ended up at 5, as you stated.
Well, there you go. So it'll be 1 county commissioner, 2 county planning commission members, 1 city planning commission member, and 1 city council member. I'll make that note too, to put it back to kind of the way I thought it. That makes sense. Okay, so catch that back up. This is part of why we have these meetings. Not the administrative review, but the what. And really, a lot of the slides that you've got in your packet there are really just reiterations of these maps that we had done. Ultimately, what we did is we took a look at the list of uses that we have within the existing joint jurisdiction ordinance, the existing ag district for Brookings County, as well as Brookings County's been going through an update of their zoning ordinance as well for quite some time, the uses that are within that proposed update as well, and went through, do these make sense, don't these make sense in the area? And then the other thing that we looked at was that as we went through, if there were some uses that weren't occurring in the area already and they didn't make any sense to occur at any time, why list them anyway? Why not just leave them prohibited? If nobody's been asking, why are we going to allow them if we don't really want them anyway in that area? What we've got here on maps is just, I'm really not even going to spend a lot of time on them unless someone wants to double back to them. We drove this area, did a land use plan, because in order to know what you want out there, you really have to know what sort of messes you're making for yourself in terms of how to handle existing uses out there, how many people are going to be out of luck if you do adopt a rule, this or that. Showing the number of uses there as far as percentages, the sorts of uses. You can see that we've got residential marked in purple on the one map. Non-ag, non-residential, so these would be non-residential uses. Then we have residences and manufactured homes, and stables. We had a lot of stables, more stables than I really expected to see as we went out there. And then this map showed some things that are not listed in your ordinance, but they're occurring out there. Some of them may be zoned differently, and that's part of it, but in the ag district, but that was some of it, as well as trying to get a handle on who's raising animals out there. And so, or where they're being raised, not who. And it give a little more detail on those. Just showed those over a couple of different features. This one here has the, I'm going to come back to this map, but the area in the hatch, the red hatch, is the 100-year floodplain, as is adopted today. The area in the, I'm going to call it blue or gray, that is the aquifer, Zone B of the Aquifer Protection District. That would be shallow aquifer is what that is. And then the area in what I'll call purple is the Zone A Aquifer Protection District. That is the wellhead protection area for the city of Brookings. And so that kind of gives you an idea as to where some of these are, where some of our constraints are in those areas as well. And we may come back to that at some point. As far as changes in regulations, obviously there were more than I'm going to show on these next 3 slides, but basically, first part, if it's non-ag, we just flat out said, need not worry about this ordinance, is what it amounts to. Go and review the city's ordinance, if it's a non-ag zone property. As far as the floodplain and the pipeline districts that the county already has, readopted the floodplain ordinance just to be sure of what the county has, just to be sure we don't run afoul of FEMA not having it here or there. So did readopt that. So if the county does have to readopt a floodplain ordinance again, that will have to be updated. Pipeline ordinance is a pipeline protection overlay district that the county has. Just referenced that ordinance. If it gets amended, that'll be a living document. As far as the ag district, there are more changes that I'm going to list in here. I already pointed out that we reviewed the uses and took out some of those which may be incompatible, but were not being used anyway at this point. Probably the main changes, I shouldn't say that. The changes that we spent the most time on discussing, and I hesitate to even say gravel pits because at the subcommittee level we really didn't, but there was a task force went together, worked on updating a gravel pit ordinance, and honestly, once it was brought to the subcommittee level, there wasn't a whole lot to hash out. It was pretty well covered. But there's discussion, a lot of discussion on small lot residences and concentrated animal feeding operations as well. Small lot residences, the ability to have a house on a small lot was debated for quite a while and had to be limited to a certain geographic area, and ultimately what we did is we just listed the sections in which they would be, and these sections, for what it's worth, are primarily south by southeast of the city of Brookings. Outside of the area for expected for most of the future development for the city of Brookings, it's limited by density, so it'd be 1 house per quarter section of the U.S. Public Land Survey, so it wouldn't be 1 per 160, it would be 1 per 40 acres. But they'd have to be on a quarter, so you grid out a section, that's your first, and then your second. So in theory, you could have 16 houses in a section in theory, as long as they're all in separate quarters. But again, remember, if you've done that grid in your mind, those squares, you're always going to have 4 right in the middle of the section that are admittedly tricky to get to. So the idea there was keep the same density, but if there's an opportunity to have smaller lot, let them. It would be by conditional use in the ag district in those specific sections. They'd also have to meet other setbacks within the district, as well as have that right to farm covenant that is already in the county. The next section, and obviously there's more to talk about with each of those, and this one is the concentrated animal feeding operations section. And again, you'll see I marked page numbers and section numbers if you want to go back through and take a look at it. Couple of things. Today, as we went through, there were no present operations, at least at the time of the survey, that were above 500 animal units. That's always one thing that we pay a lot of attention to. Are we capping somebody that's already, is someone already going to be a problem from the standpoint of the zoning rules? There wasn't anyone above that 500 mark. So ultimately the cap wound up going on at 999 animal units is what was decided up by the subcommittee. And so there would be no expansion to go beyond 999 animal units. If someone came in and wanted a new one, they would have to apply for and wanted to go up to a certain level, they'd be capped at 999. If they wanted to expand their existing one, they'd be capped at 999 as well, and have to follow the rules that are within the ordinance. The rules themselves are not a whole lot different than are in the county's ordinance today, except for there are wider setbacks on residences, if I recall. I did not put the table in there. That is one thing I forgot, but honestly, we'll be talking about that in the
You
future.
might want to explain what an animal unit is.
I probably should. It's a portion of an animal. Ultimately, an animal unit is the way that we ultimately figure out how you're going to how a horse equals a cow equals a pig equals a whatever. It's based on the waste output of an animal, and that one to one is a feeder steer. So basically they're based on the output that you would get out of and going back in history, if you look at it, it's actually off of a 1,000-pound feeder animal is what it was initially started as. Right now, a dairy cow is 1.4 to 1.43, depending on what county you're in. It's 1.4 here. The hogs wind up being 0.4. A horse, you get half a horse per animal unit if you want. I'm not sure which half you want, the left or the right, but so bottom line is that they're based that way. There's some difference. I could go on forever about it. Obviously, I dedicate entire sessions to that, but the bottom line is that we reference the numbers of animals as well as the animal units so as to give both, so that we don't lose it in translation within the ordinance. Moving on to mining, I already made that note. A lot of work was done by city, county, and industry staff to update the regulations. Required additional information from what you already have in your ordinance on haul roads, noise, visual considerations, hydrology, description of environmental impact, and reclamation. I already had some of that in the ordinance, but it just kind of bulked it up, gave a little more specifics into it. There was more to it, but I really kind of wanted to hit the highlights there. Probably the last portion that spent, let me just double check, yes, that spent a lot of time talking about were the changes in the Aquifer Protection Districts. Largely the Zone B Aquifer Protection District, that second bullet point I've got there, remain the same as what the county already has. The county has that outside of this area and really used that to be very similar to what the county already has. One thing we did do is we removed redundancies and conflicting language within there. There were some issues that we as planner types had with the way it was listed and cleaned that up. But the rest that's on there refers to the bullets at 3 and below refer to Zone A of the Aquifer District. After I read this, I realized I didn't say that within here, but I was not going to reprint all 25 of these, so I have to just tell you that. One thing that happened was removed, spoke with BMU throughout this process, and it became clear that a portion of the aquifer protection, the wellhead protection area, was no longer needed. That was a narrow area immediately east of town, and I'll just kind of show it here real quickly. There are actually 2 tracks as you look at this, and I'm not going to be able to point it out, but basically you can see there's a small, would look like actually that's not true. As you go, you can too see it. It comes from, what would that be, where 214th meets I-29 and heads at about a 1 o'clock direction. Thank you. We've got to clean up the radius here, but basically it's this area here, as I recall, that was suggested to be taken out. Now don't forget, that's not going to take out all of this because this is going to remain. But this would be the wellhead protection area, as well as this one up here. This one wouldn't apply anymore in that area. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so that was one of the first things, because as we talked about it, one of the things that we said was, well, if we're going to regulate this, let's make sure that it's right, and BMU was happy to come to the table and get that squared away. So that was one of the things that changed to get that cleared up. That also helped with us to be able to take out some of the areas of concern that we had with the ability to expand certain uses and that sort of thing. But ultimately, here's what we've got. That Zone A of the Aquifer Protection District ultimately becomes a district in which you can grow crops and you can pasture animals. You can put up a sign if you need to on an existing use out there, and put up a small pump house if need be. Under conditional use, you'd have public utilities. Makes sense because that's where your utilities buildings are going to be for BMU, among others, since that's where the wells are. Allow orchards and tree farms as a conditional use, primarily because you want to review fertilizer concerns that you'd have there. And then as a conditional use is reconstruction of existing structures. That does, I don't want to steer away from the fact that what that says in there is that's no new buildings. It's no additions, no anything. It's just no new buildings. It would be limited to the only thing you could build there is if you are rebuilding something. Something falls down, something needs to be replaced, maintained. That's all you could get building permits on. Now, again, keep in mind that is a small area. There are buildings, structures, people with property in that area, but it is a small area. That's where and that comes from any use not listed being prohibited. And I already made that point about the other things being prohibited. So in the end, those are the points that we spent a lot of months on. From here, I'm just going to point out the organization of this in general. The whereases are the first page. That's just going to be the ordinance that's going to get signed. Article 1 is the general provisions. That's, I call it legalese. It's basically the title of the document. It does include the violations and penalties sections. Definitions encompass the next 22 pages, and you can see the rest. District regulations are going to be the ag district, the overlay districts, as well as non-conforming uses. If you want to figure out how grandfather clause works, you can go ahead and read that. The administrative section is 4 sweet pages because we reference the other ordinances in that process. And then the supplemental requirements, one of the things that we had to do in here is where, of course, we had rules that were going to be different than the ag district in the county. We had to list those. And in some cases, there were some that were looking to be updated that were not in the ordinance yet for the county. So they had to be incorporated in here. So that's why that's a little bit longer in there. So to finish this, here's the process that I'm expecting we're going to need to go through. Because we all need to be meeting together, and in doing so, meeting 1 here, that's today. We talk about the description of the ordinance. Our next meeting, we need to be meeting together so that everyone's on the same page. My suggestion is that we're going to tackle the area and the administrative portions. And so what my plan is that I would suggest that I'll pass along and reemphasize the pages and the documents that we're going to need to look at ahead of that meeting. Go ahead and make notes, and we'll just talk through them. We'll want to handle this topically, not necessarily strike and underline if we can help it, because we really want to make sure you're on the same board with how this works from a topical standpoint. We know that we're going to have reviews, from a red line copy toward the end, but we really would rather avoid spending time talking about commas and in sentence structure at this point, and really want to dive into the topics and the actual substance of this. And then going through, following up meetings, talk about uses in the ag district as well as how to regulate those. And then with that third meeting, and then fourth meeting would be talking about Aquifer Protection District and whatever's left, basically, at that point. Honestly, I'm thinking that's pretty ambitious to be able to do that, because I think we're probably going to be tapped out at an hour, I would assume, because my suggestion, unless you have a different thought, is that we probably try to get together right in between both of your meetings, because you both seem to meet the same night, and try to get together for an hour in between there. So that'd be my suggestion in doing so. After that, then we bring back that convoluted chart. We ultimately have to, once we've got a draft that's ready, that you feel ready to go to a hearing with, we'll have to have a, I would say you'll want to have a kind of a public meeting to allow some comments. That'll be up to you, but then we go to public hearings. Public hearing would be a meeting one in which I'm going to suggest that we have all four entities in one room if we can, and tackle it one time. Then you'd have your public hearings, your recommendations out of both planning boards, and then first reading that night. Then meeting two would be the second reading and action by the council and county commission together. Otherwise, you've got cases where you've got to have three meetings where you've got to get folks together. And so that's really up to you, and then you've got a process. So the bottom line is, I just wanted to show the two slides to say that once the work's done here and writing it, we're not done. We've got, once you decide and feel like you're comfortable with it, guess what? We've got probably another 3 months before it's going to be effective. Congratulations, that's policy. I'm available if you've got any questions. We can go at any level here, but I don't know how bad you want to dive into details here. I don't think it's probably about the meeting structure and how you want to do that.
Just a
Unless anyone
question,
disagrees.
Luke, on the process. Meeting one, meeting two, monthly?
Yes.
I do it once a month.
I'm planning on once a month. Obviously, if you need me to be here, say there does need to be one where it's just not going to work, I can obviously swing it in between there, but I got a lot of commitments I kind of got to try and make too. So ideally, we would do once a month. And since you're already meeting at the same place at slightly different times, I thought that made the most sense to do it.
Would you like to see some action this evening to set that schedule?
It would be nice, yeah.
I mean, do you have your schedule available to?
I know that I'm going to be here the first Tuesday of the month, as far as I'm aware, going 12 out of 12 months.
I mean, to me, that should be a discussion we should have tonight to set the schedule. If we're all comfortable with the joint meeting for the next 6 months. An hour in between, then we need to make that decision and get it scheduled.
So do I hear anything from the county? I guess I was kind of thinking the same thing. It seems like we both meet on Tuesday nights, from my understanding. And I think 5:30, and of course we are 7, sometimes 8. So this worked out pretty well. If we could even do, I don't know, I mean, depending on how late your guys' meetings go. But first off, I guess, is that kind of, do Tuesday nights work for you guys, first Tuesday of each month? Looking at a lot of head nods, yes? Okay, all right, what are your thoughts?
Okay, what time do you guys normally start?
7, around this time of the year.
We usually start at
Some
5:30.
of these meetings will go into the summer when we meet at 8 o'clock because of the farming operations. So, and
We normally meet at 5:30, and depending on who the chairman is, you can get done by 6. If you're a good chairman. But, I mean, is that realistic, Mike, for us to count on getting done by, or should we start at 5:15 going forward? What's the rest of you guys think
We'll
about?
have to make that call.
Based on the agenda?
Yeah, the agenda.
And you
Like
guys.
tonight, we started at 6:30 because it was final plats and one preliminary, and
Right.
got it done quickly. I think one of the things that would help is knowing what topics we're going to discuss at the next meeting and being prepared in advance to make the use of our time. Because honestly, some of these topics we probably don't need to spend a full meeting discussing. I mean, the administration section of the ordinance is 4 pages. We might be able to breeze through that if there's really no concerns about it and move on to something else to try and gain some speed, because there is some concerns once you get into planting season, and getting quorum and meeting times and such, and that, you know, we could back up our meeting potentially to 7 p.m. so that we don't keep you here from 5:30 until 9. I'm not sure too many would be excited about that, so.
I mean, we're all planning to be here on a Tuesday night anyway. It's just a little bit change in time. I mean, I think that sounds, I'm looking, everybody's nodding, so I'm gonna take that, that's what we're gonna do.
Looking at.
Yeah,
your-
I was just double checking. We don't start going to 8 p.m. until April, so I understand, you know, it's still ways away, but kind of a heads up on our end.
And as a possible look, that as I looked at your subjects for each meeting as you started out,
Yes.
there, some of those, as Mike said, are relatively short. And if we're prepared to move it up a meeting for the
Yes.
last one,
Well, I mean,
materials could be sent out ahead of time. If time permits,
well-
may go into this subject, so go ahead and review it.
yeah, that's
you come.
basically, I think the way that, probably the bigger takeaway, especially if you're okay with it, is going to be that that's going to be the order we're going to go through. So the only problem with doing that is that, you know as well as I do, that you're going to focus on the first couple, and as we get down the list, someone may miss something, so I'm just going to urge you to, do your best to try and stay on top of it if we do it. But it's more going to be we know this is where we're going to start, and we'll go as far as we can. I agree that there'll be some cases we could go through relatively quickly, and you know as well as I do, I guess maybe you don't, there's going to be something that we don't expect to be a problem that almost always comes up. It's going to wind up taking way longer. So the bottom line is that, yes, what we take more than anything is this is the order we're going to take stuff up. And I just kind of laid out about what I expected, because that's kind of how we went the last time, is we were lucky to get 2 topics in. But yeah, I would say that too, and just kind of direct you to those things, and I can do that within 2 weeks to do it. I know what's in it, so I'm ready.
I feel like as long as we have the materials, you know, kind of, if possible even, look at the next item.
Stay in the order as it's, as presented.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
One thing I'd like to know is, are we in definitions? Are we into definitions?
Oh, right now, no, we're not going, not yet, not yet.
So, kind of consensus 7, or if earlier, I mean,
Right, we'll just keep an eye on, I mean, I think Tuesday nights that you're planning on doing an hour in between is the way to go. We'll just plan accordingly.
Okay.
Our group will plan accordingly.
or even, I guess, yeah. Yeah, that
We'll
works.
plan on you guys, it's for 7 until April, and then we'll plan on you all at 8. And so
Sounds
that's,
good.
we'll adjust our schedule accordingly. Well, he's gonna be the hour, yeah. If their meeting starts at 7, he'll be here at 6. Right. And if it's 8, it's 7. So yeah, we will adjust our schedule accordingly. Start as Mike and Stacy feel we need to start to get done for our meeting.
Let's just clarify that now. I believe we would spend the first hour of the county's designated time, start time, with the joint jurisdiction stuff. So if their meeting was scheduled to
Correct.
start at 7,
Oh, okay.
that's when so when we go to 8, then that's when we would start our meeting, is at 8. So what we'll do on the city side is we'll adjust our city planning commission accordingly, so that we don't have a 2-hour break in between. So what it means is you might actually get to go home and eat and then come back for a meeting.
Okay.
That's
All right, I get it. I misunderstood.
And there may, as far as staff goes, you may want to work together. I mean, again, we're talking about the same, it winds up being the same night. If you've got a light agenda, you've got a heavy agenda, maybe you rob Peter to pay Paul and you work your way back and forth. As long as you can get enough members, that's probably the main thing, because there's going to be a lot of, there might be a topic someone wants to talk about, but just, I'm chalked up to come in here. Looks like I'm birthday free for the next 3 months, so I should be okay.
It's worth having that conversation, though, what Eric's misunderstanding was, because the next 3 months where we're going to handle most of what's on this agenda and hopefully get through the ag stuff for sure before you guys go to the 8 o'clock start time, would you be willing to start any earlier than 7 o'clock if the first hour of the county meeting is going to be on your time? So that otherwise, if we spend the first hour, you guys are going to be here pretty late, and I mean, it's already dark out at 5:30 when you come anyway. Would you want to start earlier than 7 o'clock?
Well, just a thought, because most of our meetings when, well, and I mean, maybe yours too, I guess, but nobody's really doing any big projects in the county side usually. So that's kind of where I was thinking, but love to hear from the board what your thoughts are as well. Do you have 6:30 by chance work for the crew?
I think anything the two administrative people can work out, we'll work with. Because they're going to look at the schedules and determine how much time we're going to need for the planning meeting, or a good estimate. And
Maybe as early as 6:30, which
Yeah.
honestly works for me personally, but I want to make sure it's good with everyone. Farming community? Okay. Daryl Kleinjohn? 6:30? Okay.
Let's do it.
All right, 6:30 it is, if that works for your crew. Okay.
Okay.
And then, of course, if there are changes, you know, email the respective or however you do it. So, sounds good.
Unless I hear an objection from somebody, and I'm taking over for you guys for this minute, I'm going to declare the meeting adjourned. Any objection to declaring the meeting
Any
adjourned?
objections? So moved.
We're adjourned.
no objection.
All right. And as always, this program is going to be announced that the meeting is recorded and broadcast on TV. And we'll start out as the Brookings County Planning and Zoning Commission. And I'll go ahead and read the opening statements. Get that. Ken? Okay. And then we will move on to the next item. Excuse me, the next item for the approval of the minutes from the November 5th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we had a motion, Mr. Darrell, and a second from Mr. Bartley. Thank you. All right. Okay. So again, with the opening statement for the Planning Commission, I will now call this meeting to order. I would like to welcome those in attendance at tonight's meeting. The Brookings County Planning Zoning Commission is a 9-member commission whose function is to recommend approval or disapproval of land use plans, zoning ordinances, subdivision plats, and amendments thereof to the Brookings County Commission. The commission makes its recommendations based on the adopted comprehensive plan for the physical development of the unincorporated areas of Brookings County. As a matter of policy, all motions are made in the positive. After a motion is moved and seconded, it is open for debate. Those supporting the motion shall in turn give their reasons. Those opposing the motion shall then offer their reasons. After everyone has been given a chance to be heard, the commission shall recommend approval or disapproval based on testimony and information presented. A simple majority vote of a quorum of members of the Planning and Zoning Board in attendance is required to forward a recommendation. All right. And then, as we know, so the items listed, because we already did the approval, so the items listed to be added to the agenda by commission members or staff. Start there. Mr. Mueller?
I got one.
Oh, yes, please.
I'm just going to give you a brief update on staff at our office.
Okay. All right.
We have nothing else.
All righty. And then, did we need I thought we had talked about some members.
That would be during our staff report.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on to agenda item number 4, invitation for citizen to schedule time for the commission agenda for an item not listed. Time is limited to 5 minutes per person to address the board. Anyone in the audience that has anything not listed on the tonight's agenda? All right, seeing none, close that portion. And agenda item number 5, any conflicts of interest? Hearing none. Agenda item number 6, approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. McHugh, and a second. Thank you, Mr. Ford. And all in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. And it looks like that portion is closed. And then on to the Board of Adjustment. Doesn't look like we have to do that. So, agenda item number 7, discussion and review on upcoming draft joint zoning ordinance with First District. So we'll start out, I guess, with probably one of my big questions, if I'm understanding this correctly. This is our last meeting before next meeting, of course, when we're going to have the discussion. So if we have anything to talk about or anything like that, I feel like this is the time to do it. Is that the correct understanding? Maybe I misunderstood that then.
You've got, what you've got is each, slide up so you can hear me. Ultimately, what's going to happen is that each month you're going to go topic by topic, knocking off one topic at a time, discussing if you're comfortable with the rules that are in there or how it's going to be handled. And then if you're not, speak up. Make sure and describe why. And talk about it at those hearings. It's going to be best to talk through it with both groups present so that you don't have to try to paraphrase for someone else as to why, and try to have that into there. In doing so, the couple of ways, as was said by Mr. Struck as well, is you're going to be best served to get yourself prepared for the first handful of items that we're going to be knocking off on those things each meeting, so that you're most ready to least ready as you go on into there. And I think what's also important is that you not be afraid to point out, I didn't look at this enough. I'd really like to wait until the next meeting to attack this topic if it winds up being there in that point. That's probably the main thing. As far as if there's, from a standpoint of in between, it's not that you can't. I just would suggest that if you do, remember you're probably going to have to restate. It's not a public hearing standpoint where I have to restate what was said before, I being you, but it would only help to bolster the discussion if you do it. So, but that said, if there's something you're curious about, where's this section or where's the thing on this, by all means, even now, if there's something you want to direct me to, go for it, or be directed to, I should say.
Well, first off, I'll lay it out. Does anybody have any questions, clarifications that they
I do.
want to make sure?
Yes. In the definitions, there's the existing farmstead.
Yes.
And number 2, there's the five years of human habitation. I'm reading it correctly. 50 years. Why did we define 50 years?
It wound up being similar to what was discussed in the county's ag subcommittee when we went on, and it wound up going back to 50. Do you have that handy? I do not. Farmstead. Can I peek this? That's in the definition, or is that in the farmstead exemption section? existing farmstead within the last 50 years. 50 years was an arbitrary time frame, going back to it. Less than, obviously less than forever, but just having a time frame going back to 50 years that it's been lived in within the last 50 years. It could be less. You could shrink that up.
Actually, one of the things I think we had discussed in those years, I mean, in our
Subcommittee?
subcommittee, we had discussed maybe 10 years.
Yeah, there was I was just looking at that. A dwelling still in use and having been used in the past as a base for farming operations has been occupied within the last 3 years. It did say 10 years in there. I think that's duplicate. And so, yeah, there'd be no reason it couldn't go back to that. Because we did talk about that at that standpoint. And I think that actually, that did almost get duplicated down there in that letter A. So, yeah, we can have that. I think the main thing is just keep that marked, unless someone disagrees, but keep that marked and we can have that as something we update.
And we have to look at what we got in the regular zoning ordinance to bounce it against it.
Was that part to take away the part from the homestead, original homestead part, going away from that to
Yeah.
50 years instead of the being able to go back to the original homestead dot on the map when that was homesteaded? As I believe is where the 50 years come from, if I remember right.
Yeah, they didn't want us to keep going back to 1879 on some of the original stuff. Because there hadn't been houses there for over 100 years.
And I believe it went back 50 years, and then they had to be inhabited for X number of years during that 50, if I remember right.
I just remember one of our,
Discussions, was that 10 years?
yeah, and then, but one of our meetings as this group, we had to,
I remember it too.
Yeah.
we found
Okay.
somebody,
We'll flag that
yeah,
with the definitions.
yeah.
And anything else from the board that you were kind of flagged up by or I don't know, thinking about?
So how does that do with the 1909?
It won't be used anymore. We'll go back 50 years.
Or if the change that was just suggested, we'd only go back 10 years.
Yeah. Whatever's approved.
Has to have been lived in within 10 years.
The reason we would always go back to 1909, or I even went back to the 1870 or 80 in a book we've got, is because we didn't have maps. You know, the 50-year plat map we could probably get a hold of. That would be a good reference guide to use. I know we got them from the 50s down on the Register of Deeds, so 50 years is a good number, I think, to go back to, personally. But
Yeah, I don't know how far back the Farm Service Agency has some of those aerial maps.
Generally, what we do in those places, if they go back, and again, it might be moot at this point, but what we'll do in cases like that is we'll go to the equalization records, see if it's marked as having a structure on it, is what we'll do on them, just to go back and check. You've got that information in records. It's a little more reliable going back to that time frame. You know, what was funny is that when I had started, 50 years seemed like plenty of time to catch up to with the time frame that we had, but 50 years is going to go back to that 1976 date awful fast when we got to the existing farmstead, or when you first had zoning. You're going to be within that here real soon.
See, one of the problems with going back so far is that buildings are being put up all over the place, and sometimes it's why do we allow buildings to be put up all over the place? It's just unbelievable.
well, it's something we can discuss with, with the whole group.
Yep.
together.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And one
We'll
thing
discuss that.
with the equalization record, sometimes I've looked on some here in the county the last little bit. They've been cleaned up, their records too, so they go back X number of years, and from then backwards, those records are no longer
Yeah, I
there.
know. Yep.
So,
Good point.
Just kind of reiterating some of the special things that Luke had talked about some things, the aquifer area, Zone A. So again, we want, it sounds like, no buildings in that area, no
Correct.
new buildings.
That's what that ordinance says.
That's what that ordinance says. So remember that red mark or whatever that was up there? That's what they're referring to. And keep in mind, again, this is obviously, shall we say, well, it's a joint jurisdictional area. So thank you, Richard. That's great. So no buildings could go over that. And again, there are some existing buildings. So those are just something to throw my 2 cents out there on that.
Not only buildings, but no animals. I mean, no.
Correct.
Yes.
No animals either. So that's interesting.
They could continue to graze it for pasture or anything like that.
Grazing,
But no confined animal feeding operations
And
or
no-
anything like that.
no
And the
confinement.
existing buildings that were there in farmsteads
No confinement.
cannot expand or rebuild. They could rebuild if they apply for conditional use, but they could put no new structures on their property
Yes.
or additions on their houses or garages
Or
or.
additions on their houses, right? So something to think about. And then again, they want to create a new board. It sounds like this would be. How did that go? It was kind of like a
One county commissioner, 2 county planning
Yep.
officials, 1 city council person, and 1 city planning
Yes.
commission person.
Exactly. So be appointed by Brookings County to participate in place. Okay. Alternates. And this would be establish a joint board of adjustment. So something to bring
And
your
the county-
attention to.
The county commission would be the one that would make the appointment.
Yes. Including, well,
Yes.
because we
This
couldn't.
board, too.
You could send the recommendation, but the county commission has to be the one that
I
approves.
see. Okay. So a new board. Extra.
Well, no, we want existing board members. We don't want different.
Right, right.
Yeah,
But I mean, that's what I'm saying, is there would be an addition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand that. And then the other one was, let's see, animal units on small acres, or acreages, I guess. So it kind of sounds like they're looking at animals versus animal units in some of that. Or were they just translating?
Well, some of that.
Because I know animal units is based
Some
on
of that's with the
waste.
state DNR, Department
Yeah.
of Environment and Natural Resource. They can't get their head out of the rear end to figure out,
Which is which?
do they want to count a cow, or do they want to do animals?
Yeah. Yeah, right.
And some of it probably goes back to the EPA, even higher than that. So.
Relative, yeah. I don't. So, kind of the same thing, I guess, is what I was thinking. Is yeah, why not just keep animal units, keep it all the same?
Well, we're trying to be consistent statewide on that
Yeah.
particular thing. Whereas if one county has got animal units and the other county doesn't, then we need to be conforming with whatever the state requirements are.
And then as for the quarter section rule, so again, this is the joint jurisdictional area, just kind of to picture that area out there. And there could technically be up to 16 houses in one area. And the whole point is we want things to be annexed. The city needs to kind of keep expanding, of course, hence the point of this. We don't want random places popping up, I guess. Not really the point of
When we
zoning.
get to that discussion, what
So,
we'll do is we'll print out a
I know,
map.
just
showing-
making sure everybody's
we'll zoom in-
understanding.
We'll zoom into that particular area and get you a map. So you can
Yep,
understand.
making sure everybody's understanding on our board what all this is.
Are
So,
those the sections on there, Richard? Sorry. I'm sure that
Yes, they are in yellow.
those are the ones that were referenced? Okay,
Yep.
good. I was going to make a map. I'm glad you did already.
and
And that would be addition to the one house per 35 acres could be on there. plus they could apply for a conditional use for the 3 acres. So there could be 2 houses on 40 acres, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, just
Yep.
wanted to make
There
sure
could
the
be
board
2
was aware of
houses on
that.
40 acres.
But we would like to get that lower right-hand map on an 8x10.
Yeah, do
or
that as a
8.5
bigger
by
one.
11. A standalone map by itself. When we discuss that, whatever day Mr. Mueller discusses that, that needs to be passed out to each board member.
Yep.
But in a square mile, there could be 16 homes, right?
Up to.
Up to 16 homes.
Yes, but they would-
plus the one per 35 acres.
Oh, it would be, I think I said that wrong. You get one house per
Yep.
35
I'll
acres,
Back up just a little bit.
but you only have to have a 3-acre lot. So, like,
Yep,
does it say
one house,
35? Does it say?
but you could have all those
That shows them bigger.
houses in that area. All
So
at
let's say that
T.
again. It's
You get
it's one house. I've said too many breakdowns here. It's one house per quarter section. That's a 40. Okay.
That's a
Yep.
40.
One house per 40,
So there's 4 homes in a quarter section.
but you could have as small as a 3-acre lot. So that one that's already got a 35, no, that one is done. I'm sorry, I said that wrong.
Okay.
If there's already a house there, that one's used up already. Now they could carve it down to 3 acres, but it's still the only house that gets to be in that one. And it was closed off specifically. There is no transfer of development right. So transfer of development right would be to say, well, it'd be better to have 2 houses in the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter instead of have one in the southwest and the southeast. If you're able to follow my squares.
So they could trade.
Yeah, there's no trading, is what it amounts to. And so it could be a lot less obtuse, but it's a lot more. It does open the door differently than you've ever been open before.
So it's not, what about, places where we've allowed 2 homes where a family member builds another home on the same acreage?
That still has its own hole that it can go into for, say, the family member or the farm operator.
I thought we took that stick part out. It's still in there?
It's still the existing farmstead has that. We call it existing farmstead. You get it's the relative employee housing still allowed. Same way. We'd essentially treat that as one on the quarter with that. So they're not using someone else's. Although I won't get into it, but
On this,
You're getting too deep.
I am.
on this quarter, does that have to be square quarters or can it be 4 long ones?
Nope.
Because you made a
Square.
comment, they have to be square.
Yep, it's the U.S. Public Land Survey quarter. Southeast of the southeast, southwest of the southeast, and so on.
It's so lawyers can figure it out.
Very true.
Never mind.
And then just really look at also the, I guess, the boundaries and stuff like that. And I mean, just simple age-old stuff too. Let's say you do have your, 3-acre chicken farm or whatever. CAFO wants to go in next to that. Just remember, that's what we're looking at. So that was my 2 cents.
One of the things that I will say this, as you look at this and talk about it, I was very, I'm not going to say surprised because I've been through this before, but it was every time the same, though they're different concerns, they turn into about the same concerns between the city planning and the county planning, whereas county planning is trying to view an ag district as a economic development district where you can do only one thing that you can't do anywhere else, which is farm. And so you want to avoid having things plopped up in your way. We heard a lot of the same thing out of the city, which was every time we put a building up or something within an area we plan to grow, that's something we got to grow around, or else we got to wait for it to come down. And so it was heartening, I think, for both sides to hear that, oh gosh, we each have the same concern. It's just that when it comes down to the things that the county is okay seeing and the city is okay seeing, those are the things that sometimes get a little different.
And as with any city, I mean, even Sioux Falls is going through this, is eventually you're going to hit natural landmarks, whether it be the Big Sioux River in our case, kind of their case too, Falls, like, but Volga even, or the college on the north, we got the interstate / Aurora over here. Eventually, the city has to keep expanding its areas, and if they want to annex it, or for those who maybe aren't familiar with that term, the city, when they annex something, it has to be right next to it. Otherwise, it cannot be part of that city or part of the city. So if they don't build something, or if they don't say, okay, now you're part of the city, they can't just skip over the college and say, hey, now you are, or something. So they're going to eventually start building up. So they do want to, but it's a matter of kind of getting over these hoops of, high water areas. And how are they going to do that? Eventually they're going to have to annex and go over that somehow, whatever that may be, wherever they want to develop. Just making sure that it's the way that we want it to happen too. So.
And then we settled on a 3-acre
Well,
minimum, didn't we? It can't be less than 3 acres.
Right.
Because of not having to come back in and hear X number of zoning or
Variances.
variances and whatnot.
Yep. And that was one of those things that we didn't expect to take a long time that took a long time, as far as how big of a square is the right size square, and other way around, which was what is the best small square that we can have. And it was that, plus we did a minimum lot width as well. I think it was 330 feet wide was the minimum width on that, to give room on each side to do so. And I think it was also came down to access spacing as well, so that we made sure that we had future development. If the city did have to grow around them, you're chewing up a block, is what you're chewing up. 330 feet is a block, plus or minus.
Because
And
quite
so-
often, if you can afford to develop acreage, you can afford to build quite a big house and quite a big and a building outside, for a boat or a mechanic shop, or somebody's going to try to run a self-employed,
Yeah.
home-based business out of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. Well, any other questions that we have right now? Be vocal. Just let me know what your thoughts are as well. But we kind of have to make sure that we're on the same page as well. So.
One thing I forgot to mention, I meant to say this with the city's planning commission too, but if you're looking at it, wondering what the heck it means,
Yeah.
don't hesitate to call or email. That's fine. Go ahead, and like what you had, Daryl, too. Go ahead and email me if you got a question about it too. Where'd it come from? What is it? Go ahead and get a hold of me, and then so I can either explain, yeah, that's a deal, or no, that's not a deal, that sort of thing, and go through it, or else say, come armed for next meeting and good luck. It could be anything like that too.
I think another comment, I just got to thinking a little bit more about what I had said was, what I was saying was more about the out in the county, but with now I'm having trouble with the together with the city.
Yeah, with the joint, yeah.
With the joint, with what is written with the joint, that's fine. Putting it together with a joint, the 50-year, that's probably good with the 50-year. But out in the county, I don't want it to be that far apart. I mean to be that long.
Be that long of a look back.
So
We'll have it. Make sure we talk about it.
Yeah.
On this, but it's good to know.
Alrighty. Let me grab my agenda. All right. So, anything else from anyone? Okay. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, department reports.
Yes, Mr. Randy Jensen and Tom Davis were both selected by the county commissioner to be full planning board members. Of course, Mr. Jensen's been on for years. Mr. Davis moved up from being a 1-year, so now he's got a full term on us. We're still looking for one alternate to replace him, And Roger Erickson was also re-chosen to be on the zoning board as an alternate. Richard's going to a CAFO class in Huron next week. FEMA's in town. If you know anyone out in the country within Brookings County boundaries that took water damage in that September rain event, when we had anywhere from 7 to 10 inches of rain, to include water that came from the south to the north around Lake Campbell, they need to call that 1-800 number that we've been advertising. If they don't know it, have them call the office, and we'll give them the 1-800 number. And FEMA's in the process of setting up a center in Brookings that's going to be here for 1 week and to help all these people. There's no charge if you think you got damage and they come out and look at it and say, no, that's from your house being 100 years old. There's no charge. I mean, that's their job to come out and take a look at it. If you seriously got damage, FEMA's here to help us recover from it. And if you're making stuff up, they'll figure that out pretty fast. But we encourage anyone that took water in the basement that had damages. Hopefully you took pictures, and if you had to go rent sump pumps and stuff like that to get the water out, that's the kind of stuff you want to bring to the meeting when you meet with them, and they'll help reimburse up to a certain extent. Tomorrow at 9 o'clock up in this room, we've got a public assistance meeting with FEMA. This is where your township officials, at least one member from every township that filed a claim for this September event needs to come in to that meeting so that we can be briefed by FEMA in the state of South Dakota. And most townships have been affected from the March snow event. So basically it's the same thing we went through before. Yes, you need to come in again, this is a different declaration, different set of monies, whole 9 yards. And last but not least, the county commission, we've been putting radio repeaters in. We put a new repeater in White and in Bruce. And we're improving the radio communications. We're monitoring all the communications now to see if we need any more adjustments. And other than that, that's all I have. Richard, do you have anything? That's it,
No, I do
Madam
not.
Chair.
All righty. Looks like no agenda item number 9, so agenda item number 10 is adjourned.
That's where you make a motion to.
Do I hear a motion? I was gonna say, I didn't think.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Do I have a second? If I guess we're going with this. No one's seconding it. We'll just.
I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thanks for coming down, Luke.